Welcome to The Wire. I'm Chris, and as you already know, Rob Machado is a pipe master who competed on the world tour for 10 years and won 12 events before retiring in 2001. But what you don't know is that Rob Machado is also responsible for having brought a component of psychological support to professional surfers on the WSL. It was around 2010 when Rob introduced the WSL to his best friend since the age of 6, Christian Glasgow. And today, Christian heads up psychological services for the World Surf League. Christian is a licensed clinical psychotherapist specializing in providing psychological counseling services during crisis situations. And you will not hear this from him, but you will hear this from me. Christian has helped athletes, actors, and musicians whose names you would be very familiar with, including even his best friend Rob Machado, which we do talk about on this episode. The story behind why this podcast happened is at around the 43-minute mark, and I think that you'll enjoy it. I think you'll like this entire episode. Here we go. Just want to start, Rob. Can you introduce Christian? Like, who is he? I mean, give our audience some context.
Yeah.
Who is he? How do you know him? How did you meet? Let's sort of start there.
Do you remember the first time we met?
No, but I remember our first soccer team.
Yeah. How old were we? We have the photo
6.
still. We were 6, yeah. So, first soccer team, Cardiff Soccer League. We both lived here in Cardiff. And from there, Christian became like the guy. He was like the best surfer in town in our age group.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. He was sponsored by Takayama.
Huh.
Yeah, he still got his quiver of boards, actually.
So who was in that crew? Like, who was surfing with you guys back then at that age when you were ruling the roost, Christian?
Oh no! Well, it's funny because looking back when you mentioned that, we grew up in a really competitive environment, and like a lot of our friends, Frankie Hayduck. Frankie was a really good surfer, and he was even better soccer player, and I got to play soccer with him. Mm-hmm. And he ended up playing for like the U.S. national team and played in a couple World Cups.
Whoa!
And so it's like when we were just kids, we just were pushing each other. John Swift was a really good surfer. He's an astrophysicist.
Whoa!
Yeah,
Astrophysicist.
That was our crew. Everyone in our crew. It was, yeah.
So you guys all grew up to have fairly interesting, uncommon professions.
Yeah.
A lot of you guys did.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the moment, maybe just for entertainment's sake, where Rob became the surfer with talent above everyone else and you got seated downward to number 2? And do you remember what that was like?
Yeah, I totally remember what it's like. We were heading into high school, and Rob had already kind of made the decision with soccer because he was playing club soccer. And he decided that he was going to focus on the surf thing. And so I kept doing soccer and surfing, and my fate wasn't determined by my decision. My dad got remarried, mm-hmm. and like I'm going into high school at San Diego, living in Cardiff, just like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest place ever. And we move up to Sonoma County.
Uh-oh.
And it literally was like moving to Russia. And, well, I shouldn't say Russia.
You could say Russia. Moving to Russia, Ukraine.
Really far away.
Yeah, but at a kid at that age, like my whole friend group, everything, and I was literally so isolated. I was an hour and a half from the closest beach. I was the only person who surfed at my high school, and I'm watching Rob go through his thing, and then Frankie, was going through his thing with soccer, mm-hmm. and I was just like, I was just really bummed because I didn't have my peer group. I was the new kid at school, and then he just took off.
I don't know if a lot of people know the story of how you dropped soccer, Rob.
Oh yeah.
There's a pretty funny for a kid story of what the waves were good or something. And
yeah.
What happened there?
There was a gradual build to it. Like Christian said, I was playing competitive on a club team, traveling, doing the whole thing. And then surfing just started like winning out over soccer practice, right? And so then my last year of soccer, I decided, I'll just downgrade and I'll play rec soccer mm-hmm. in the Cardiff Soccer League, right? Mm-hmm. I'd go to a couple practices, you know, coming from like a club team to a rec team, you're like the star player kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. And I just remember one day I was like, dude, I don't even want to go to practice anymore. This is lame. And I came home from school. All my friends used my house as like the spot to leave their boards because it was the closest house to the beach. And everyone came to the house. Everyone was suiting up. Oh, I heard the waves are good. And I just looked around and just went, screw it, I'm going surfing. And I remember those guys had already left. They suited up and bailed. So I'm by myself. I'm running down Santa Fe towards Swami's, and I see this car come over the hill, and it's my soccer coach,
Brian Thompson, right?
Brian Thompson.
On his way to soccer practice.
And it was our eyeballs. He was on, no joke, on his way to soccer practice. Our eyes lock, and I just see him go by, and I just turned and kept running, and that was pretty much the end.
That was it.
Yeah.
So there you are, quitting soccer, becoming a surfer. Christian, or becoming more of a surfer, more of a competitive surfer.
Yeah.
And you're off in Sonoma.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward through a long stretch of time really quick. And Rob, how do you describe what Christian does for a living? What is his profession and what's it been for the last 10 or so, 20 or so years?
Well, he can give you the proper terminology.
He
but,
can, but I want your perspective.
Yeah, my perspective. He is my best friend, my therapist, all wrapped in one.
Actual therapist.
Actual.
No metaphor here.
No,
you
no
guys
metaphor.
have a professional relationship.
We
He's
do.
your therapist.
For sure, 100%. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be super mindful of like, you know, there's a term in my profession called a dual relationship. And so there's certain things where, you know, you really don't want to cross those lines, but Rob and I have had a really great, respectful relationship where, you know, there's things that, you know, we talk in confidence and we get professional opinions, and if he needs something a little bit more that I'm not comfortable with, he totally gets it. And, you know, there's other mechanisms of support in place to help him out.
There's been times where he's been like, dude, go talk to this person. Like, this is like, it's too like intertwined with our, you know, our lives, and like, I know too much and you need to just take that over there, which is totally cool.
What an interesting tightrope kind of thing for you to walk.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
You called it a dual relationship.
Yep, that's the technical term.
And maybe some more examples of what a dual relationship is. I mean, could you technically be married to someone and be their therapist?
No.
That's too much of a dual relationship.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, you pretty much just like nailed the worst example you could possibly give. But the thing is for example, we all have issues and everyone's going through something. And so whether it's a relationship or parents or someone sick or something like that, everyone's kind of biased and they've got your back. And so they kind of tell you what you want to hear. So someone like me, being a third party removed from the situation, it completely changes the dynamic. And so it's like, it's not a friendly relationship, it's a business relationship. And there's expertise, and then there's a lot more in-depth work as far as finding out about previous relationships, family of origin issues, genetics, culture, their life experience, how they see the world, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really super complex.
So speaking to that complexity, before I ask another specific question about your experience with Rob, you mentioned genetics, family, origin. It makes me consider that in your line of work, you have to get to know someone, a client. You have to get to know their habits. You have to get to know the environmental factors that led to them being who they are, the environmental factors in their family or their home life or their business life that act on them currently. And it makes me wonder, all of us throw around this word subconscious a lot. Like, we have our conscious mind and then our conscious mind, which we're not necessarily living in or aware of. Give me a number. Like, how much of ourselves as human beings do we generally understand? Like, when I think of me and I think I know myself, do I get 20% of why I am the way I am? Is 80% of me just subconscious habits that I'm not even aware of, that I'm not actively living in? Like, I mean, is there a way to quantify it?
It's really hard to quantify, but I think what you can examine that kind of will give people examples is, I don't know your level of understanding of yourself. It's like, that's a really hard thing to quantify. It's like, how well do you know yourself? Well, I think as you get older, you know, there's no substitute for experience, and you know what works and what doesn't work for you. May not necessarily be what works for everyone else, but there are also, you know, some generalizations that apply culturally to certain cultures. Not to get too wordy on this stuff, but
you can get wordy as you want, man. People love this shit.
Really. Yeah, good. Well, I think that the most important thing for anyone, especially adults, is having the ability to recognize and respect other people's opinions and other people's beliefs, because what's right for someone isn't necessarily right for everyone else. And it's really tricky. It's so tricky.
So the main nugget I'm taking out of that is like everyone understands themselves to varying degrees depending on how conscious they are of themselves and their thoughts and their life and how willing they are to embrace facts and reality.
But I think the most important piece to what you just said is knowing when you're wrong and being able to admit it. I think that's super important.
Okay. With, man, that's heavy. Knowing when you're wrong and being able to admit it, maybe to others or even to yourself.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, well said.
So let's get a little bit more specific into your guys' relationship. So, Rob, you were on the tour for what, like 10 years?
Yeah.
And we're basically top 5 all the time. Pretty remarkable, to put it mildly. Am I right that you, for a period of time, spoke to Christian before every heat? Would he be like a pre-heat therapist, psychologist type of a function?
Yeah. You know, that our relationship kind of really kicked into that phase, like more so after I got off tour. When I was competing, it was, you know, communicating back then, we're talking in the 90s, there wasn't, you know, we weren't carrying around cell phones, and like when you're on the other side of the world, you know, there was the occasional phone call, you know, from a payphone to check in, but it was mostly postcards. And
yeah, I think a lot of our relationship definitely got better as technology got better. I mean, I still have postcards from him. He would send me the funniest postcards.
So would that just be like as friends, you'd be swapping postcards?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like, my dear therapist, let me tell you about.
No, and I think at his age, at that time, it was eat, sleep, surf, and there wasn't really, you know, I know this may sound weird, but it wasn't like there was a lot going on.
No.
It was like you were singularly focused.
Oh, it was, my main sole focus was on, you know, how I was preparing for the next event. I was surfboards, my health, my fitness, where the event was, booking plane tickets, rental car, place to stay. Like, you're just juggling all those things. That was your main focus in life, like being on tour. You know, people kind of, I think, from the outskirts look at tour life as being, oh, it's this glorious, and it is. Like, it's great. Look, you get to travel the world, and now it might be different. I see a lot of guys traveling with a bigger crew, and there's probably a lot of people doing stuff for them. But back then, man, all of us, you know, we talked, like, we would travel together as far as, like, you know, we had our Momentum generation kind of crew, but we were all doing it ourselves. We were booking our own flights and booking all that stuff. And so, I mean, there was just a sole focus, man. It was like, do good in contests and have a killer Taylor Steele section.
Yeah.
That was your focus in life.
And I kind of think you might have hinted at this, like, to you at that age, life hadn't really happened yet.
Yeah.
Like, everything was sort of simple, narrow view.
It was like living a dream.
And when was the moment, and Christian, maybe you can guide us on how to, you know, appropriately share things like this. Was there a personal or professional moment that you kind of were like, wow, like a professional relationship with a therapist is useful for me?
I'm trying to nail down like a single moment, you know, when that kind of started for us.
Yeah, I can't think of the specific time, and I know that's probably a really bad answer. But I think how I would answer that is there's been multiple things, and literally someone, you know, at Rob's level and any professional, like whether it be football, baseball, snowboarding, surfing, whatever, literally about 95% at that level is completely physical. It's completely physical. And so at that level, things change. It gets significantly more intense. And that 5 or 10% is the mental piece. It's like, think about them on tour. It's such a small group, and they travel together. They don't have any place to really open up or talk about personal stuff that's going on, because that's literally an advantage for someone else to know that you're hurting.
Yeah.
And so I think as technology advanced and email and cell phones and this, that, and the other, I do a lot of performance stuff, but the majority of what I do is letting people process and unload about what's going on. And it's literally lightening the load, opening up some space mentally so they don't have to carry it, so they can go do their job. Because on tour and I've been around, I've had my head behind the curtain in a lot of different sports and venues. It's a very small place, and everyone's under a microscope, especially these days.
Yeah. How about, that's an interesting number to say it's like 95% physical. Is the 5% just a matter of blocking everything out and just quieting your mind?
That's part of it. That's definitely part of it. And then in the world of surfing, the two people that really come to mind are Mick Fanning and Tyler Wright. When Tyler Wright was at the U.S. Open like 2 or 3 years ago, whenever she won the title, she was so methodical. And I watched her before like 3 of her heats just to go check it out, because I was, being a bit of a warrior. Just, oh my gosh. And the mental preparedness that she would go through to get ready to go do her thing was really impressive.
Can you give us examples of what kind of like a competitive or like a ritual someone might go through to get in a competitive headspace?
The greatest one of all time is Michael Phelps, the greatest decorated Olympian ever. And he made a bunch of noise on the news, I think in Brazil, because he had his hood up, he had his headphones on, and one of his competitors was trying to like get in his head. But the thing is like Michael had done that so many times over the course of 4 years in preparation that you have to do that, because you can train all you want, but until you're in that environment, say like an Olympic environment, and you're actually walking into, opening ceremony, and you're seeing the sights and smells, and you're getting all that rush of adrenaline and seeing everything that's going on. And all of a sudden you got to go like compete, and then there's cameras, and then it's like everything you worked for, and then you're there. So quieting the mind, it's preparation. It's literally systematic. And throughout all the chaos, you have to ground yourself. And there's a great term that, my business partner who works on a lot of stuff, Dr. Ron Stolberg, autonomic mitigation, which is, your autonomic system with adrenaline and cortisol and this, that, and the other. It's reducing that, or learning how to reduce that so that you can do your job effectively.
Say that again.
Autonomic mitigation.
So that's like mitigating the effects of your autonomic nervous system as they try to make you run from a lion.
Correct.
But there's no lion. You got to just deal with it.
Well, yeah, that or like 4 billion people watching the Olympics on TV. What's scarier?
It's interesting because, like, I think back to the U.S. Open, I think it was 2001, and just through my own personal searching on ways to deal with that, right? I found myself, the best thing that I could do, because we didn't really have these like quiet places where you could go and get away, so I discovered like the doctor's tent. Right, and so between my heats on the Sunday, I'd go in there, and they had massage tables set up, and I would just lay on a massage table, and they'd be like, "Oh, do you want to get some work done?" I said, "No, I'm just gonna lay here."
This is the only quiet place I can find.
And because no one really goes in those spaces, and if you're laying on a table with your eyes closed,
no one's gonna question it.
Yeah,
no one's gonna come up and talk to you.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and so like I would just bring a towel, and I'd pull a towel all the way up to my neck, like I was under my little blanket, so I was warm. I'd close my eyes, and I'd just focus on my breathing, and I just laid there and just visualized like whatever it was. It just helped me relax, right?
Yeah.
And and it gave me a lot of success, being able to just escape, because if you stand around in the competitors area, people come up to you, talk to you. It's never ending. It's constant. Like somebody is going to talk to you, or you're going to talk to someone. And so I had no problem getting away from that.
So can you recall off the top of your head, and I know you're still friends with guys on the tour, so this might be secrets that you'd want to keep. Who is someone that really threatened you with head games ahead of a heat or a contest, and how did they do it? Or is there an example of a way that you effectively learned to destruct a guy's head before he competed against you?
That was never an option in my mind. The way I approached competing was that I was going out to surf against myself. The other guy was just the other guy. Mm-hmm. It was kind of irrelevant in my mind. I had to come up with ways to be competitive. Like I had to find it inside of me that when I put a jersey on and went into the water, that I was willing to do whatever it was going to take to win. Mm-hmm. Because, back then, if you're in a QS event, it was a 4-man heat. There was no priority. It was kind of a free for all. You had to go out and fight for waves. And I remember having heats. I had a final in England with 3 Brazilians that had all decided that they were going to try and stop me. Whoa. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Like you got to fight for your waves and do your thing. But then coming back to the beach, I had to learn how to take that jersey off and leave it all out in the water. Right. And so it was kind of this dance, right, that you played with. It was learning how to be cool and calm and collected and to maintain your focus on land, but then unleash something when you got into the water.
Mm-hmm. So in a much less consequential way, anyone can end up in a situation like that, where it could be someone in college and they're giving a presentation tomorrow and they're freaked out. It could be someone has to give a presentation at work. It could be someone's going to a job interview tomorrow. And I wonder, when you're laying on the massage table and your eyes are closed and you're breathing, did you have any specific breathing technique? Would you just watch your breath? Would you inhale to 7, exhale to 7? Any specific technique for visualizing that you would use?
The visualizing for me was all about preparation and just confirming in my own mind that everything I've done up to that point was good. Mm-hmm. And just I'm completely ready for this moment. My board feels great. I can already see that left down the beach, and I'm going to go paddle far away from everyone else and catch. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to will these things to happen. They're going to happen kind of thing. Yeah. Right. And just sometimes I'd maybe even fall asleep. And so it's a crazy emotional roller coaster ride of these physical exertion, emotional, while you're in a heat to coming in, between the quarters, a semi, and a final, and almost falling asleep on this table, and then getting up and splashing water in your face and going, okay, here we go again.
Is it just constantly activating your limbic system in these different ways? Or autonomic nervous system, you're just...
And that's exactly what, we said a few moments ago about autonomic mitigation and parasympathetic, sympathetic, and all that. And it's one of the things that I do with a lot of the younger athletes is get them in tune with their body. Where do they feel it? You talk about breathing. I mean, if anyone is ever experiencing anxiety or panic attack, the best thing you do is breathe in your nose, take it down in your solar plexus, press out, slow rhythmic breathing. Mm-hmm. And and it's funny, I remember one time, because the US Open, I don't know what year it was, but he didn't get the wild card. And I remember Pat O'Connell was he's got to earn it this year. And it was something so simple, but he was a little cagey. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of dancing around. And actually for Huntington, it was really good. It was solid 6 feet, wedges as good as it gets there. And Nate Yeomans was in it, Connor Coffin was in it, and someone else, I forget who. Mm-hmm. But you were contemplating what board to ride. And you're oh, I got this one. It was a little flat, short, wider one. Mm-hmm. And the waves were clearly really good. And then he had the regular shred stick. He's I think I'm going to ride this one. I'm no, you're not. You're going to ride the regular short board.
So what was going on in his head there?
I don't know specifically, but I think it was like, and you said this to me the other day, that the most important piece for any professional surfer is to have confidence in your equipment. Mm-hmm. What board is underneath your feet. So what I think was going on was he was kind of flip-flopping about what's going to give me the best chance. And so it was like, oh, I'll ride the flat one, this, that, and the other, which is, 90% of the time you ride that at Huntington, but not that day.
What year was this roughly?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
It might have been 06.
Yeah, you won the trials that year, and I think that got you in the lowers.
So let's hold that 06 thought for a second and come back to it later, because it relates to something that I want to bring up in a moment. But I want to ask you one more question on the breathing. I participated in this event that the Inertia hosted recently, and Gabby Reese was up on a stage, wife of Laird Hamilton, mm-hmm. and she just said, breathe in for 7 seconds, breathe out for 7 seconds. Is there a better technique for breathing? And here's my real question. A lot of people don't have the patience to sit and consciously breathe for 3 minutes. They get distracted. Our head is a drunk monkey, whatever metaphor you want to use. So is there any tool or practice that someone can use to like actually adopt like a breathing practice in their life to calm their stress? A counting technique, a type of breathing, any advice there? The kind of generalized response is whatever works for you. But because there's a lot of variability with what works for people, but literally if you breathe in your nose, out your mouth, you're going to calm your system down regardless. And how you get good at it, it's like meditation. You sit and try and sit for a minute, 2 minutes and clear your mind. It takes a lot of practice. Mm-hmm. It takes a ton of practice. So I think the best piece of advice I could give anyone is slow play it, work it into your daily routine so it becomes something that doesn't feel foreign or forced. It feels more natural. Okay.
Don't go straight into like a 2-hour breathing technique.
Yeah. Don't boil the ocean at once.
Don't do it, Chris.
Okay. Done. Thank you for that advice.
Yeah. Are you gonna
work your way up to it.
Should I keep my competitive achievement trophies in the garden? See, this I don't know if many people know this. I remember, and I don't know if it's still true. I was at your house like maybe a year ago, and we were in your front yard, and there's trophies like beneath trees and in the garden in your front, just sitting there in your front yard, like it been there for like a decade.
There's one in this yard.
So we're at your brother's house right now.
Yeah.
Can I take a picture of that one and put it in the show notes for this episode?
Don't even know why it's here, but I'll go grab it. We'll see what it is.
So what does that say about you, that like you have a trophy from an event where you beat the world's best surfers and won a bunch of money, and it just ends up in your brother's yard, or your other trophies are just littering your garden? How did that happen and why? Because most people, you envision every other pro surfer's trophies, they've got them like mounted somewhere, like on a freaking, in a case with like light shining on them or something like that.
Yeah.
And you just toss it in the garden when you get home from Spain or something? Like what is that?
Well, I hope trophies have evolved. And I like to think maybe I had a little bit to do with it, because I always told, anytime Hurley did an event, I always thought, like, make the trophy, like, really cool. Like, mm-hmm. Because, I mean, going back to, like, surfing the NSSAs, right, when we were kids, I remember, like, winning, every week you wanted to win a trophy, and it was that little fake wood thing with the surfer dude, and they probably still use them. Mm-hmm. And I started shelves in my room, and I had shelves and shelves, mm-hmm. and my dad had to keep adding shelves. It was like...
That's a good problem to have, though.
Every Sunday and build more shelves. More trophies, more little wooden trophies to the shelves.
But I had a contest every single weekend. Uh-huh. NSSA, WSA, CSA, YMCA. Like, dude, I was in every thing possible.
Yeah.
So that's 4 trophies a month. That's, do the math.
2 shelves a week. Yeah.
Right? And so
you become a pro and you're over this, or you're like, I don't care about trophies anymore?
I just remember, like, at one point, like, I got to a place where I started looking at them, and I was just like, why do I have all these things? Like, what do they represent? Do I look back and I look at it and go, oh, I remember that event. That was great. Yeah, I was at Huntington and whatever. Yeah. You don't remember much about those things. But, taking it up a notch, and you're right, like, there's much more prestige in winning like a world tour event. And a lot of times what happens, you're on stage and there's always champagne involved, and they get sprayed around and you're doused in champagne. And I remember I'd come home, I'd have my jersey, I'd stuff my jersey in the trophy, and I'd get home, and I don't know, I'd just like hose it off in the lawn, and then I'd think about like, where am I gonna put this like gold cup? Like, where could this
Golden goblet.
where is this thing really gonna live in my house? You know, like, is it gonna like on the mantle? Like, I don't have a trophy room, so then I kind of just. They never made it anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So they just stayed out there after.
Well, one did. I have my Pipe Masters trophy.
So
it's in my office somewhere.
What year did you win Pipe Masters?
2000.
And shortly after, you leave the tour.
Yeah.
You broke your hand. You didn't get an injury wild card the next year. Cliff's notes here. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you get this wild surprise in, I think, 2001. You're walking down the street in Hawaii. And someone's like, oh, dude, sorry you're off the tour now. And you're like, wait, what? What do you mean? Mm-hmm. Everyone kind of knows what happened next. You joined Hurley, became the free surfer that everyone knows you to be today. But I don't think many people know how you broke your hand. And I think that the person who is maybe responsible for breaking your hand or played a part in it is sitting across from us at this table right now. So can you guys, for the first time...
Can we air it out?
Air it out. Because let's give context to this right now. Like, you were a competitive surfer, your life was the tour, you were doing very well, you were making a living, your whole identity is wrapped up in professional surfing, and then all of a sudden that is taken away from you, and you go through this period of like figuring out, well, who am I, what do I do, what boards am I riding? And pretty fair to say it was a traumatic change in your life for a period of time. Mm-hmm. All due to breaking your hand. So how did you break your hand?
Do you want to tell the story?
And how did you drop off the tour in 2000 that required you needing an injury wild card in 01 that you did not get? How did this happen?
So going back to the beginning of the conversation about like childhood and being raised in a competitive environment, like we have a very friendly rivalry, and I know Rob is like, you know, he's a legend of the sport. He surfs incredibly well. I mean, we went and surfed this morning, and I'm still trying to get better waves than him.
Who won this morning?
I think you got me on the floater.
The one floater got
the
you?
one floater.
Yeah, the floater won the day.
So you're competitive.
Yeah.
Competitive friends.
He got some good waves this morning, though.
Okay.
So it was summertime, and he was home from the tour, and we were surfing this little spot just a little bit north of Grandview. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't very big. It was like, you know, maybe 2-3 feet. And then all of a sudden this wave comes through, and it's like this little double up. And so I look up at Rob, and he's turned around, and he realizes he's a little too far out. And I'm just like, great. I'm literally right in front of him. So I turn, and I'm kind of just paddling. Like, I know I'm going to get it. And then all of a sudden I feel this thing come over the back of me, and it's literally like Rob on his board paddling over me trying to get the wave, which normally, I mean, a lot of people don't know this about Rob, but he's incredibly competitive when he's in that environment, and he definitely gives it his all. And so he was giving it his all with me.
And you feel his board creeping up on you, trestle style, paddle over the guy.
Yeah, and I feel a whack on my backside, and then I get the wave, and I kick out, and I'm smiling like I just got a 7.5, and I'm like, yes. And he's sitting.
And you look back.
I look back, and Rob's holding his hand in agony, and I went, oh no.
So do you remember paddling for that wave behind him?
Yeah.
And what's going through your head? Like, he's not getting this out from under me, or what?
Well, there was two things. Yeah.
I can't wait to hear
that. Was one.
I can't wait to hear this.
That, and then the other thing is what?
Well, it was a right. He was in the spot, and I was like, there was a part of my mind that I was like, because I'll rewind a little bit. The waves were pretty wild that day. There was a lot of closeouts, and this thing came in. It was like actually had a proper teepee, and the right was really good. And I could see him like he knew he was going right, and I was on the wrong side to go left.
Yeah.
So I tried to kind of do what Kelly did to Beshin but I wanted to go left. Really, I knew he had the right. Like, I'm not gonna drop in behind him. He's going no matter what. So I tried to come on the other side and squeak around so I could split the peak. And
So you tried to squeak onto his left side.
onto his left side. I paddled like basically over his feet and legs and like trying to get onto the other side of him. And as I came over the other side, my hand hit his kind of like his leg / rail and just folded my hand like under it. Like in that moment, like when you're just digging super deep to kind of paddle into that wave.
You immediately know it was broke?
No, I just knew it hurt, but I was like,
So what goes through your head? Do you think to yourself, oh, I just broke my buddy Rob's hand, or my buddy Rob just broke his hand on me? Or do you think I've just been involved in a catastrophe where one of the high marquee professional surfers on the planet just may have destroyed his hand and everything might go south now? Like what goes through your head there?
What went through my head was nothing because I was in shock. And what I was hoping is that he didn't break it or do something like that. And then got the news and I felt terrible, and it was like,
it wasn't your fault.
no, I know.
Is this the first time you've ever told him that? Has it been decades
It's
of
not
resentment?
your fault.
I wanna
Very
tell you
well
for the
said.
first
Don't we
time.
say that in therapy
Yes.
often?
Yes.
Wow.
It's not your fault.
Whoa. Wild, man.
Yeah, I mean, because it was right at the peak of the career and all that stuff, and I just, I felt bad, like being involved, and I just remember I thought his dad was gonna kill me.
Did he? No.
I wouldn't like go to his parents' house for like a month and a half. I was
And
so
then
scared.
How do you make those calls to sponsors and stuff? Hey guys, I'm out. My hands.
Well,
touched.
actually,
what do you tell them?
Like, I think it was either a week later, a couple weeks later, I got a phone call from Gotcha. They filed for bankruptcy. So I was on a roll.
So this is that joke you've made before where you're like, that was a great year.
It was
like,
a great year.
Everything that could go wrong
Yeah.
went wrong.
Yeah.
Everything's over.
So there I was. I didn't have my major sponsor. I had a broken hand. And then fast forward a few months. That happened in early summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then, September 11th.
Mm-hmm.
Which we were literally getting on a plane the next day to go to Europe for the European leg.
So you would have left on the 12th,
Yeah,
but that happened on the 11th.
yeah.
And then the next day you're like, nah, it's not happening.
It's not happening.
Just one tiny detail that's interesting. Like, who calls you from Gotcha and what do they say?
That's a good question. I don't remember.
And
I don't know if it was I had a manager at the time.
For anyone who doesn't know, Gotcha was an enormous company.
Yeah.
Throughout the 80s and 90s, board shorts, t-shirts, clothing, all that. Did you see that coming at all, or was it totally blindsided?
I saw it coming. It was kind of a downward spiral for a few years, and they were kind of digging themselves into a pretty big hole.
Okay.
And then it just came to an abrupt end. You just don't. You think, oh, they're gonna pull it off. They're gonna pull it off, and then just all of a sudden everything stops. No paycheck, no nothing. All of a sudden you're like taking all the stickers off your boards. And you're kind of like, oh, what do I do now?
Whoa. Well, everyone knows the happy ending that befell you as a result of leaving Gotcha and leaving the tour and things like that. But what a lot of people don't know is that I think I can say you're at least partially responsible for bringing this component of psychological support to professional surfing today. And I wonder if you can tell us how you introduced Christian to the WSL, or how you were introduced to the WSL Christian, and kind of like what your job with the World Surf League is right now.
I'm going to go find my trophy.
Okay.
Well, basically, it really stems back to Andy Irons passing. And after that happened, every major professional sports team has someone like me available. I mean, the majority of what a lot of the psychologists were initially hired for was for substance abuse violation. Mm-hmm. And so mandatory, like baseball, you test dirty for something that on the substance list and you're banned for 80 something games automatically.
Whoa.
And like National Football League, you pop dirty for something, whether it be street or performance enhancing, they kind of keep it under wraps, and you have to go for a year, 2 years every week and utilize psychological support. And if you violate that again, then that's when it gets released to the public. So for me, with Andy, everyone was kind of scratching their head because no one had really ever felt a loss like that in the world of surfing. And not to say that people who haven't lost loved ones is, you know, in big wave surfing and stuff like that. But on that level, a 3-time world champ, a beloved, you know, individual from the islands, it was unprecedented. And so I was getting a bunch of calls from people in the industry that were close, and everyone was just shocked. And so Rob's like, I don't know, what can we do? I'm like, maybe we can get in touch with some people. Maybe we can provide some support. And it really just kind of started from that point. And Rob called Pat O'Connell, and Pat's like, this is great. I mean, you got two guys that at the time had been on tour. They've been through some life stuff. They've seen a lot, and they saw the need. And moving forward, those two guys opened a lot of doors. They gave us, they gave me in particular a lot of access to people. And eventually it was, you know, we went down to the Hurley event at Lowers, and we had been talking honestly for a while with then the ASP when Brody Carr was in. And then we were supposed to go to San Francisco and sit down with the board. And then there was the numbers mistake. And so Kelly had to surf one more heat. And then there was something else that happened. We were supposed to go to Hawaii and meet with the board. Never happened.
What year were you first planning on talking to Brody Carr with ASP?
Andy passed away in 2010. Right around that time was when they were beginning to do that transition. And you know, to get back to the story, like it was Paul Speaker and Kieran Pirro and Rob and Pat were at the event, and Rob just went and got Paul and Kieran, and we sat down at the event, myself and my business colleague who also does psych services for the tour, Ron Stolberg, and we sat and have a conversation. And it was really funny because a lot of people, Rob would never not really give people much background information. He just said, just listen to these guys, see what they have to say, because he was confident in us and what we were trying to do and provide that level of support. So we sat down, had the conversation. They understood that we weren't looking for anything other than to try and help. And so we wrote a proposal and went to all the surfers reps. Went to a few of the managers. I think there was some feedback on that, and off we went. And we've been doing it the last 5-6 years.
Do you have a title, and is there a name of the program? Is there an official name of the program that you kind of oversee or manage?
We are just part of we head up the psychological services for the athletes, and we are under the umbrella of the medical staff. And so our role is to basically, in the beginning, it was be on call. Anyone needs something going on, there's an emergency, we get the call. And so what has happened is, I mean, there's so many things that happen with the WSL, and they're super great. Like Sophie's been really wonderful. Paul was really wonderful with us, and they really want what's best for the athletes. I mean, Kieran Pirro, Jesse Miley Dyer, Travis Logie. I mean, everyone involved really puts the athletes first. And what Rob was talking about, like some of his stuff back in the day, there was no mechanism of support whatsoever.
Wow, yeah.
And so what happens is like there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that no one knows about and no one has any clue about. And that's what I do is I provide safety and security in a place for you know, to navigate landscapes that people haven't been through before, real emergency type situations. I mean, we drew up a list of potential things that could happen.
Whoa.
And
so you have like emergency preparedness plans in the same way that we would plan for like an earthquake or a hurricane or a typhoon or something?
Absolutely. Man, I've worked school shootings. I've been involved with, you know, national court cases. Whoa. And it's emergency response 101.
Should we introduce somebody? So we're here at Rob's brother's house, and
this is Jamie.
Hi,
Yeah.
Hi guys.
This is Chris.
Just coming home from lunch.
Hi. We're just recording a podcast.
Okay, carry on.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us use your kitchen.
This was such a quiet environment. I dug that out of the garden.
Short's been living.
1993 Bud Surf Tour champion.
So we're meeting Rob's brother's wife and looking at Rob's trophy that he just pulled out of his brother's garden, and we're going to put a photo of this in the show notes. So Rob, you tell us, like, when you look at this Bud champion trophy, like, what do you feel? Anything? What goes through your mind? Like,
fucking awesome trophy, isn't it?
is that
Don't you want that somewhere in your house?
don't you want to hang this thing up? Is this one of the trophies that inspired you to pressure Hurley to like make gorgeous trophies?
And I dare you to try and pick it up.
What do you think it weighs? Is it
More than me.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, it's super heavy and a little bit awkward, and it's broken. It used to be connected, the bottom part to the top part.
Okay.
Now it's separate, and yeah.
And I'll describe this as like a metal wave that looks like a circle on a slab of marble that looks like something that was built out of a lawyer's table or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good description.
That's there we go. Speaking of this trophy, Rob, like this podcast came out to be in a really interesting way for me, because you were a couple weeks ago surfing in the trials for the Surf Ranch Pro, and you're in the trials with 3 other surfers, and it was a private trials event at Surf Ranch. It wasn't open to the public, but the Instagram story world was abuzz with like footage of you surfing and footage of the trials, and people claiming in the stories, Rob's ripping, Rob might win it. I was getting texts from people saying Rob's tearing it apart. This is gnarly. The footage, some of it ran on Firewire's Instagram story, was very fun to watch. And I said on a stage at this Inertia Rant event that I mentioned earlier that it looked like you could collect scalps within WSL events. But after the event, after the trials, you and I were texting, and you said something really interesting. And I want to read it now. I actually have it written down in front of me. You were texting after the trials, and you said, "It felt really weird to try that hard again. I didn't enjoy it that much, but it feels good. I could have won that thing, but in a weird way, I'm kind of glad I didn't win." And then you said, "I know this sounds totally confusing to you, and I probably should be in therapy for it, but that's what makes me, me." I mean, I was reading these text messages like deeply confused, because it's like,
I
it
sound
felt
confused.
great, but I hated it. I could have won, but I'm happy that I didn't. And this is only a snippet of some of the things that you were saying. I mean, like,
right after I wrote that, I called Christian.
So I mean,
Yeah.
So what was that experience like for you? Because I have to say it bluntly for any audience members who didn't see it, even though I know this is strange to hear, like, you were fucking ripping, like, on a little chippy board, tearing the place apart, top to bottom, quick whips, deeper barrels than anyone, bent into a pretzel going backside. Like, it was fucking insane.
First of all, it's a strange process being in a pool. It's not at all like competing in the ocean. Because the ocean, you go out and there's all this unknown, and part of being in the ocean is finding a wave, right? Mm-hmm. That's half the battle. It's like finding actually a good wave that you can ride. That has all been taken out of the equation, and now it's just like a guy telling you that you have 30 seconds until a wave's going to come. And every single wave that comes has the potential of being a 10-point ride. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you're removing all of that out of the equation. Wave selection, quality, blah, blah, blah. So the whole dynamic in my head completely changes. You're like, okay, I just have to ride waves. But you're still getting scored, and you're getting scored against other guys, and you're just like, so it like stirs up like competitiveness from way back when. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, I got a 6 on my first wave. I can do better than that. You want to build and do something better because it's going to be 8s or better, mm-hmm. right? So it was physically exerting, as we saw during the event that the WSL had. Mm-hmm. Those guys were all exhausted. Yeah. After riding those waves, they were. To ride 2 waves back to back, to go down and to come back one after the other it's hard to do. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot, and you saw those guys feeling it. And we rode, I want to say we rode 4 waves, 4 rights and 4 lefts each. Mm-hmm. There was only 4 guys, so it was all in a matter of, it was pretty quick turnaround. And we did the same scenario. You'd ride one wave down, one wave back.
Mm-hmm.
That was your first wave. One wave down, one wave back.
Yeah.
So by the end of that, yeah, everyone was pretty tired.
So you're physically tired, and you're also experiencing life as this person who you were 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And it was, on the balance, like a confusing experience.
Yeah, I don't take myself there very often. Never, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nowadays that just doesn't ever happen. So to get into that mindset was a challenge, to like, okay, when you watch the guys in the event, the WSL guys, like there's no downtime. No one's doing a high line and cruising and like, I'm going to, just glide through this section. Like it's nonstop action. Like those guys are just off the bottom, off the top, off the bottom, off the top.
Yeah.
And every turn has to be super precise and on point and in tune and dialed in. Your boards have to be, that's their deal.
Mm-hmm.
So to try and insert yourself into that mindset after not doing it for a long period of time is kind of stressful.
Yeah.
That's the stressful side of it. Then there's the physical side of it. And then all of that just leads to emotional meltdown.
Before we touch on the emotional meltdown, Christian, did you see any of the footage from this day?
Yeah, I did.
So it struck me what you just said, because we all see you surfing seaside on a moonbeam this month, for example, and you're cruising and cracking turns and surfing these little waves, and it just looks fun. It looks like you had a coffee and an acai bowl and you're cruising and you're out there with your buddies, and that's what we see from you for a long time. And then watching this surf ranch footage in the trials was you doing all the stuff that you said professional surfers do, like off the bottom, cranking at 6 to 12. And watching that was like, holy shit, like it's all still there kind of a thing. Were you surprised, or that like, wow, like I can still do this and go head to head with like a 20-year-old kid who everyone's hyping as like the next thing? Hiroto, what is his name? Hiroto Ohara. Yeah. Like, what? You must have been pleasantly surprised by that, I would imagine.
I was, yeah. No, it's always that part stoked me out. Like to be able to go out, it's double-sided, right? Like to be able to go out and have the chance to surf against these kids that are half my age, and to like feel like I wasn't just like totally dusted and left.
Yeah.
Like I actually felt like I kind of kept up to speed with those guys, and but then there's a side of me too that like, well, maybe I took a spot from another kid.
Like I had my time and I want to give it to someone else now.
Right. It's like there's all these 20-year-old kids. It's like, why wouldn't you just put another 20-year-old kid in there?
The answer is because it's merit based, and you still, by merit of your surfing talent and ability, like totally have a place there. It's almost like you invite the whole surfing population to participate in this fantasy with you, where you're just this cruisy guy who likes to surf twin fins, and we all participate in this delusion with you. While really, you're this competitive powerhouse who can collect scalps, you just don't really do it. But I mean, back to the emotional breakdown part. I mean, you must have not missed that headspace.
Well, I mean, dude, that whole situation, like I said, right? It comes down to this, like at the end of the event, and we saw this during the WSL event. It's like everyone needs a score, right? There was like, I think Hiroto was in the lead and I needed a 7.8, right? Usually in the ocean, you're hunting down a wave it's going to give you the potential to give you that score, right? Yeah. That's removed. They're giving you the opportunity to get a 10. Here it comes. It's like all on you, right?
Yeah.
So then the emotional side of it is like, dude, I mean, I've already got an 8 on my other wave. Like I know I can do it.
Yeah.
I just have to do it. And then it just becomes like letting go. And I think that's the hard side for me after not competing for a long period of time. And Christian could probably add to this, is like you lose touch of that ability to remove that emotional kind of, I don't know, headspace that you get into, like to be able to just let go and surf and just get into a rhythm and let you be you, right? And not the cruisy. Yeah, that's the emotional roller coaster, right? Not the you that is just surfing seaside on a twin fin cruising. It's like the super high performance, I'm trying to win a heat you that I haven't tapped into for long periods of time.
Yeah, it's like I shouldn't be joking about this in front of a professional therapist, but like it's like it almost sounds like some bipolarness. Like which me do I need to be today?
Yeah.
And there's the conflict, and I haven't been this me for 15 years. Now, I don't know if Rob went through this, so whether he did or didn't, just sort of treat this as a hypothetical because it's something that interests me. Like, I envision myself being in a circumstance like Rob, up against this ripping kid like Hiroto, and I wonder if I would have, like, worthiness issues. I go through things in life where I'm on the cusp of, like, a big success in something, and that's when the self-sabotage starts.
You're touching on something, especially in particular with, you know, you look at people on the PGA Tour or something like that, where they're about to win their first golf tournament, and they're this prodigy rookie. They've paid their dues and stuff like that, and they start doing the what if game. Like, what if I actually win this? And stuff creeps in, and you watch people fall apart left and right, because winning is hard to do. And once you figure it out, then that's a great blueprint for the future. But I think generally, and a lot of the athletes that I work with, whether it be in their personal life or in their particular sport that they're doing, I always ask, what is the biggest killer of confidence? And that's doubt, self-doubt. Mm-hmm. And so for Rob to be put back in that environment, it is abnormal. Mm-hmm. And it's like going back in time a little bit. And then it's like, whoa, I haven't felt this in a while. And that's really, really cool. That feels kind of good, but I kind of don't like it because it's something new again. And you get this, you know, mental kind of tennis match going between your ears. But what you guys are talking about as far as like Lemoore and all that, you removed a ton of variables. And it was all performance based, and it was really for me sitting back and watching people get ready to go do their heat. There's no warm ups. I mean, Atala Ferreira was like on this little carved skateboard, just headphones on, just blaring through this little area, just pumping up and down. And I know a lot of people that normally wouldn't even phase on doing a heat anywhere else in the world. It was way different, and it was out of people's comfort zones. And do they have the physical capabilities? Absolutely. But what was going on mentally? There was probably more anxiety about that event than any other event this year, is my guess.
Real quick on that topic, like what I found really interesting was when it came down to that last run, whether it be to make the cut or whether it be to win the event, right? And like I touched on before, like there was a bar set, like somebody was in the lead, somebody needed a score, right? Now, you're going to get a wave that has the potential to be a 10-point ride, and all you have to do is surf it. How many times does that happen in the ocean? Like how many times do heats come down where they're like, you need an 8-point ride, and here comes a 10-point potential wave?
Never. Right.
Like it rarely happens, right? Yeah. So you've kind of flipped the whole script here. Like most of the time it's like guys are needing 7s, 8s, right? And they're scrapping around and they find a wave that maybe is a 6 and they're going to try and turn it into an 8, right?
Yeah.
And so that whole thing has been flipped now. It's like, here's your 10-point ride. Do with it whatever you deem suitable, right? I mean, yeah. It's so, as far as like the anxiety that Christian's talking about, it was like higher than ever because it's not coming down to, how many times you hear a guy after heat, I couldn't find the wave.
All the time.
Couldn't find the wave, man. Yeah. Wasn't out there. Like, you know. So it's like, you had the waves. Everyone had the waves. Mm-hmm. It's all performance based. And what between your ears was doing.
The tennis match between your ears.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know what went through my head when you said, if I succeed in this, what's going to happen? Or if I win this, what's going to happen? Just as a hypothetical in my head, having that window into your head that I did through the text messages and watching you take everyone apart earlier that day, I wonder just, is there something in your head that's like, ugh, like if I win this, I just got to do this again and go do this, be in another contest and like
right.
be this guy again. And I wonder just in my head what the psychology is like on that next wave where you might be wondering, I don't know, do I really want to live this life again? Like, do I want to be like Joe Turpel in my face in 2 weeks? And like, what?
I think subconsciously those thoughts go through your head, and whether that plays into your performance, probably does.
Look, maybe just to sort of start tapering us off here, I'd like to, if we can, like try to make this useful for our listeners, because I mean, I think that everyone goes through varying degrees of challenges in their life, and it's impossible for us to know what our listeners are dealing with now. Maybe they just have a stubbed toe, and that's the extent of their life's ails, but other people have stuff going on. And I wonder, like, Kristen, are there any like daily, weekly, or monthly rituals that you do to keep yourself like mentally healthy? Because you said before you're like the safety net, or you didn't use these words, but the line of last defense for like if something goes wrong with an athlete, you have to have your triage plan of how you go support them and enable them to get through what they're going through. You must have to keep yourself in like a remarkably solid, capable, emotional, mental, and spiritual state in order to be safety nets for other people. So like, how do you do that? Is it what kind of self-talk, what kind of meditation, what kind of long walks, what kind of books? Like, what do you do to keep your fitness in those areas high so that you can support other people?
Two things that stand out for me is self-care. It's like having a physical outlet for myself. And that's what I encourage a lot of people to do, whether it just be in my normal practice or people with, in the entertainment or athletic, is you got to have a level of enrichment. And part of my self-care outside of the physical piece, like going surfing or just like go on a run, anything to just kind of stimulate yourself, is I go talk, and I'm a huge advocate. I do this stuff for a reason, for clinical counseling psychology. It's like your tooth hurts, go see a dentist. Your car breaks down, go see a mechanic. You got stuff going on in your life and you need a sounding board to figure it out, go talk to someone. And the daily reminder to me is, people don't come to me because things are going well.
Yeah.
And I have to always, whenever I'm in certain social situations, it's like, I don't know what's going on in that person's life. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and display some empathy and consider what they're going through. I mean, I wouldn't be very effective at my job if everyone knew what was going on in my life and I let it overtake me. But I happen to have a little bit of an advantage because I do this stuff, and I've learned how to figure out ways to take care of myself. But more than anything, it's be empathetic towards one another and be empathetic towards yourself. We are in such a bang, quick Instagram, Facebook, everything's out there, and we never take time to hit pause. I think hitting pause on a daily basis to be able to just kind of ground yourself and take inventory and gain some perspective, because whatever it is you're going through, hopefully it'll pass, and most times it does.
Talking to you guys has been super fun and super interesting for me, especially digging into like the realities of your work, Christian. What have we missed? What else is important?
Well, I think the important thing, and since I'm a bit of a advocate for mental health and support, it's like with the notion that everyone's kind of got something going on in their life, and if you recognize a friend or a family member and something's off or different, and Rob said it earlier, I think communication's a highly underrated skill. Check in with each other, especially that you care about, because we don't know what's going on. And I think that a lot of people, and especially, in certain situations, it's like you don't want to ever go, I wish I would have said something. I'm much happier standing up and having an uncomfortable conversation, and the person can get upset with me or whatever, but I'll be happy that I said something. I made an effort. So I would encourage everyone, family, friends, coworkers, if something's a little bit off, take the time and be respectful and check in on them.
He's really good at it.
Really?
He calls me just randomly. We won't talk for a couple weeks or whatever, and he'll just call randomly. What's up, dude? What's going on? And he's like, just want to call, check in. How you doing? I'm like, I'm good. He's like, okay.
Okay.
No, and then he'll pause and he'll go, how are you? Like,
Whoa.
for real, And then I'm like, Well,
Chris wants
now
me to make this stupid video.
now that you mention it,
I don't want to do it.
and then, an hour later, we're still on the phone, just diving into whatever.
So when it comes to being a good friend or a good family member, when Rob explains the situation, what strikes me is possibly your use of silence to get people to actually talk about what's real. Like, how you doing? Say nothing. Okay, well, what else? Say nothing. Is the thrust of what I'm saying like accurate, or is there another? Because the thing that goes through my mind is like, let's hypothetically assume I'm on the phone with Rob. How do I, if I think something's up, or my brother or whoever, how do you say that I think something's up without offending them? Some people just get offended that you would think something's wrong or that they're not hiding it well or something like that.
That's interesting. I think, part of it, obviously, the silence and everything is, I'm just trained that way. I'm a trained listener. And so I use certain terminology and questions to elicit responses. It's funny in my business, the hardest people to deal with are the one word non-responsive, like, hey, how's it going? Fine. Mm-hmm. A lot of teenagers.
Fine.
So what'd you do this weekend? Nothing. But there are certain ways to do it, and I have found that just the blanket statement, hey, noticed something was up, don't want to intrude, if you need anything, let me know, because you're putting the ball in the other person's court. If they want to talk about it, great. If they don't, you've been able to say something and you've opened the door. And maybe if you really see someone struggling with that, follow up again. But it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And if you're coming from a place of care, and Rob and I always, we have that advantage because he knows I come from that place. It's like, I'm going to ask that question.
Look, I wouldn't be mad if we ended up doing something like this with you again. I think your line of work's super interesting. I think it's very important. I think it's nice to both shine a light on what the WSL is doing in the name of psychological health for the athletes, and use that kind of as an example to make it okay for someone like me or someone like anyone to recognize that psychological things go on with all of us and all of our friends and our family members, etc. So if any of our listeners want to get more familiar with what you do, how do they find you? Or are you on social media, website, anything like that? Just if anyone's curious.
They can just Google my name. I've got two websites. One is just my normal general. It's my first and last name, christianglasgow.com. And then the sports entertainment side is opspsych.com, optimal performance sport psych.com.
Okay. How do you spell your last name?
Glasgow, just like the city in Scotland.
Okay. Christian, Rob,
Chris,
thanks for having me.
And that is it for this episode of the Wire podcast. You will find links and resources and everything else associated with this episode at firewiresurfboards.com/the-wire.